Hello, everybody. How you doing this evening? Good. I'd like to welcome you here tonight. We're going to have another meeting on the signs of the second coming of Jesus. If you happen to not be here last night and you'd like to go and look at that, I think that that's me. Welcome, Jeff McAuliffe. Thank you for welcoming me. That there's a website that you can go to and look at on YouTube and look at review it from last night. And that'll continue to happen as we go through the meetings. So I'm excited that Jonathan has another exciting presentation for us tonight. And then tomorrow night, what's tomorrow night? It's Armageddon. Yeah, that's been in the news lately, hasn't it? And so that'll be interesting to listen to as well. So we're going to sing a song and then we'll get started. And again, welcome.
Good evening. If we can all stand for our opening theme song. Reminder tonight, last night we only sang the chorus twice. Tonight we'll sing the verses and the chorus. Years of time have come and gone since I first heard it told how Jesus would come again someday. If back then it seemed so real, and I was just, close yesterday. Signs of the time are everywhere, and there's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern sky. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh. Strife on every hand, and violence fills the land. Still some people doubt he'll come again. But the word of God is true. He'll redeem his chosen few. Don't lose hope, soon Christ Jesus will descend. Signs of the times are everywhere, and there's a brand new feeling in the air. Keep your eyes upon the eastern sky. Lift up your head, redemption draweth nigh. Thank you, everyone. You can be seated.
Good evening, and welcome back to Signs of the Second Coming. What this is a special Bible prophecy seminar where we take a look at Daniel and Revelation and go just a little bit deeper. Once again, my name is Jonathan Ryan. I am one of your two hosts. You've already met Jeff, and he has Tuesday night message, and you're not going to want to miss that, sorry. If this is your first time here, I want to explain once again how this seminar works. It's a subject on Bible prophecy, and what we believe and what I believe is that to study the Bible, we need to use the Bible. So we don't need any other materials because that's just going to cause some confusion. And I personally believe that the Bible will explain itself. We're going to examine what this book says. We're going to learn the principles and how to use the tools and see how prophecy actually works. You're going to eventually discover that it's not a scary book. It's a thick book, and I'm not a big reader, so sometimes it seems like it might take me a minute to get through, but it's not scary. It's not mysterious. It actually makes a lot of sense once you just open it up. And like I said last night, the key to understanding Bible prophecy is reading the entire thing. Just like in Nebuchadnezzar's dream last night, we saw we didn't get the answer to the prophecy until we got to the end of the chapter. I know it's a big book, but we're going to get through it. Tonight, we're going to take a look at a very broad prophecy. Some nights are going to be more specific about smaller chapters, but tonight is going to be a broad one that applies to us. Last night, we covered, about 3,000 years of history from Napoleon. We covered Charlemagne, Charles, Louis XIV, and the way he was. But I promise you, at the end of this, you're going to understand something new. All we need to use are the tools that the Bible gives us. And I want to review quickly what we went over last night, if you missed it. Last night, we went through the story of Nebuchadnezzar and his dream. And we went through the head of gold, the silver, bronze, and iron legs, and the feet mixed with iron and clay. And we learned a couple things. We learned that God is in control of history throughout all time. But now you guys get to participate. Can anybody tell me what the head of gold meant? Who was the head of gold? All right, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, exactly. All right. How about the iron legs? Rome, okay. And the question is, when Rome broke apart, and those 10 nations were separated, were they ever able to get back together? No, why not? Because God said they shall never adhere to one another. And the last question is, what was the final kingdom that we talked about last night? God's kingdom, exactly, and how it's coming soon. That everything in Daniel's prophecy from Daniel chapter 2 has come to pass except the coming of Jesus. And if you feel like it's impossible keeping up with what we're talking about tonight, we will have the notes in the back. On top of that, what I didn't mention last night is if you guys have questions about any of the topics that we've covered before, like last night, or we're going to cover tonight or cover later, you can write down your questions, and there's a question box back there. Try to keep it connected to the subject. That way we can answer it. And I promise you that if I don't know the answer to one of your questions, I won't make one up. Either I'll go find the answer in the Bible, or I'll just let you know I don't know. All right, and if it's your first night here as well, don't forget to register, because after 10 meetings, you get a free Bible. This was the Bible I said last night that I just got, and I'm really enjoying it. But you guys can have this Bible for free. All you have to do is get your attendance, which comes with your little key tag here. All right, I think that is all the announcements that I have. Tonight, our subject is Planet in Upheaval. Everywhere I go, I see a lot of people saying that the world isn't the way it used to be. Our crime rates are high. Our natural disasters are getting crazy. But is this really all true? Is the world on the verge of some really big changes? And is the second coming of Christ around the corner? Should I even expect it in my lifetime or somebody else's generation? I'm going to dig into a Bible passage that happened 2,000 years ago when Jesus was here, a story that he gave us. I'm going to let you guys be the judge tonight on when Jesus is coming again. Tomorrow night, the subject is Armageddon. And last night I told you Hollywood really loves this topic because they can throw out movies left and right, from aliens abducting you to nuclear disaster to zombies, you name it. They can make money off of it. But is it this? Is it a nuclear disaster? Is it Ebola taking over the planet, COVID-19? Well, we're going to have to figure that out. And the Bible gives us some clues. So tomorrow night's going to be a very special evening because we're going to take basic Bible principles and basic tools, and it's going to help us understand how to unravel prophecy. And it's going to be found in Revelation chapter 16. That is where Armageddon is mentioned. All right, so our topic tonight, a planet in upheaval. But before we get going, I'm a Bible-based Christian and I prefer to pray. So let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for your love and your mercies, God. I pray, Lord, as I speak this word, Lord, that you will use me, Lord, that you will speak through me. Humble me, Lord, and thank you for all the people that came tonight, and I hope that they will enjoy this study. In your name, amen. All right. So like I said, this passage takes place 2,000 years ago. Jesus is walking outside of Jerusalem, and his disciples look over and they glance this gigantic structure, and pride starts beating in their hearts. And can you guess what that structure might be? The temple, exactly. And the disciples are thinking, man, look at this thing. For those who don't know about the Jewish temple at this time, it would have been equivalent to one of the, what do we call them? The 8 wonders of the world, but back then. And this is not the first temple, this is the second one. People know it as Herod's temple. People from all around the world would come just to see what this thing looked like. But Jesus stops and he says something that really bothers them. And what he says sets the stage for the understanding of history from then on. In Matthew 24:2, he says, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." That doesn't sound like good news. This is the glorious thing that they have in their entire world, basically, for the Hebrews. That, like, this is the pinnacle. Was Jesus right? Yes, about 40 years later, in 70 AD, a group of zealots from the Hebrew nation decided to rebel against their Roman captors. And what they did is they threw their rocks, or they started a little tiny mini war, I guess you could say. But it doesn't really turn out when a couple hundred people or a couple thousand people decide to fight an entire nation. So the Romans sent out this general named Titus. And Titus is supposed to go there and squash this rebellion and defeat the zealots. And in doing so, the zealots realize that they have no match. So what do? They retreat inside the temple because, it's like a fortress. This temple is amazing. And as the Roman soldiers break into the temple and they start going room to room, there are hundreds of zealots in here. And of course, it's dark in there. So what do they have in their hands? Torches. And as they're looking, now we don't know if this is on purpose or by accident, a torch somehow catches the building on fire. You see, the cedar inside of this temple is hundreds of years old. This was rebuilt back in the Greek times. So it goes up in flames, and all the zealots end up dying. Now you think to yourself, well, that means, it caught on fire, but the structure, the base, the foundation, it should all still be there. Jesus says not one stone shall be left upon it. So if it burns down, you still have a foundation. Well, what happened is because there was so much decadence inside the temple, walls were made out of gold, furniture was made out of gold. When the heat of the furnace or the fire ended up melting all of this gold, and it started to seep inside the cracks in the foundation of the temple. And originally the Romans really didn't want to destroy this thing. This was pretty much an accident. They really respected history and culture and all these things. They were really much into art. So this is like an act of God. And what ends up happening is after the fire goes out, so much gold melted that the soldiers decided that they would take a little bit home themselves. So they start tearing up the foundation of the temple to get to the gold. So Jesus' prophecy came true just 40 years later. You can see that when Titus conquered or defeated the zealots, in Rome they built this ark. And it's to remind, it's basically an ark that says this is the victory over the Hebrews that rebelled. And inside this ark, it's called the Ark of Titus, you can see on the next picture that there is the 7-branch candlestick. So it's showing all the things that they took out. And it happened the exact way Jesus said it would happen. Not one stone would be left upon another. And of course, that really bothered the disciples in the moment when Jesus said that. Because for them, if the temple falls, it must be the end of the world. I kid you not, the temple was so great for the Hebrew nation that they thought Jesus is saying the temple is going to fall, therefore the end of the world must be there. I guess they forgot that nearly 800 years before, the other temple had fallen when the Babylonians came through. So they came to Jesus with a question. And we see this question in Matthew 24, verse 3. Now he sat on the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the signs of your coming and of the end of the age? Lord, if the temple falls and the end of the world is coming, can you tell us a sign? Can you let us know when your second coming will be?" Now listen carefully, because what Jesus says next has bothered people for the past 2,000 years. Because Jesus didn't give them a straight answer. And he says in verse 4, "And Jesus answered them and said to them, 'Take heed that no one deceives you.'" What did he tell them to do? Take heed. Why? Because he knew that there would be deception coming. And that's a very important word. And you're going to see this word throughout the entire Bible. Does anybody remember in the Bible where the first deception happened? In the Garden of Eden. Exactly. So it's all about deceiving. And of course, that's not God who's doing that. So God says, in the last day, be careful of those who are going to deceive you. Don't just take people for their word. You want to be sure for yourself. Let no one deceive you. Why? Well, in verse 25, it says this, "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am Christ,' and will deceive many." How many? Many. Lots of people, not just a few. "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end has not yet come." Or the end is not yet. So all these things are happening, but it's not over. In verse 7, "For the nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in various places." "Lord, when are you going to return?" is what they ask him. "How will we know? What are the signs?" "You're going to know when it's close," Jesus tells them. "Watch for these things: false Christs, increase of war, famine, pestilence, and earthquake. Then watch out, because it's almost time." Now the skeptic is going to say, "Oh, nonsense. We've had wars almost since the beginning of time. We've had famines, we've had pestilence, and we've had earthquakes and fires and all these things. Those aren't a sign of anything." And you know, it would actually be pretty tempting to believe them, because we have always had these things. Nothing's new. Jesus knew that there were fires and earthquakes when he was around. So why is he saying it now? But if you're going to study the Bible, what did we say? You have to study the entire thing. Because these skeptics forget to read the rest of the verse or the rest of the chapter. It's literally just one verse later. In verse 8, all these things are what? The beginning of sorrows. It doesn't say all these things are the end time. It says it's the beginning of sorrows. And this is a very important word, and Jesus does not use it on accident. And I'll show you why in a minute. The question of you, how many of you guys have had a baby? Okay, I saw a guy raise his hand and stick it back down. I was expecting that, don't worry. But your wife has had a baby. All right, okay. All right, I haven't had a baby. However, my wife will be in March, so I'll understand a little bit more about that. Now I have a question. Do babies arrive without any notice or warning? Do you wake up one morning and say, "Oh, I'm due"? No, it's a time process. They don't just pop out unexpectedly. I don't know much about being in labor, but being one of 5 kids, my mom would inform me a lot on all our previous history of being born. So and we grew up on a farm, so we saw that kind of labor. When a baby is born, the mother starts to feel these things called contractions. And at first, they're kind of spaced out. They could literally be 30, 40, 50 minutes apart, and you don't have to worry about a thing. But what ends up happening the closer and closer you get to the birth? They become faster, stronger, And you'll know when you're almost there, until it's obvious you're out of time. Do you know what Jesus uses this word sorrows in the Bible? In Greek, this word sorrows has a deeper meaning. The word is odin, and it means birth pains. So Jesus is saying all these things are the beginning of birth pains. He's not telling you these are the birth. He's telling you these are the beginning of the contractions. Jesus knows we've always had war. He knows we've always had famines and pestilence and earthquakes, but he's telling us they're contractions. At first, they might be few and far between, but as we get closer to the second coming, they're going to get faster and stronger. So let me ask you another question. If Jesus warned us to look for contractions, how big do you think the contractions are tonight? You think they're bigger than they used to be? You think we're getting a little bit closer to the birth? How close are we getting? Now, I want to be very careful tonight and state this right out the front. I cannot and I do not recommend taking darts and throwing them at a calendar trying to figure out when Jesus is going to come next. I don't really believe in that because the Bible tells us we can't know the day that Jesus is coming. In Matthew 24:36, it says, "No man knows the day or the hour." Now, some of your wheels might be spinning and you might be saying, we might not know the day or the hour, but how about the seasons, like the month or the year? It doesn't say that in that verse. Well, unfortunately, Acts 1:7 does say, Jesus tells his disciples that we cannot know the times or the seasons. We are not allowed to know the exact moment when Jesus returns. That's for the Father to tell. So, of course, the question is, why not? Why doesn't God just make it easy for me and say, I'm going to come next week, be ready? Do you think I'd be ready? Hopefully. He's given me the date. If I ask my wife out on a date and I say, be ready at 7, does she expect me at 7:30 or 8 o'clock? No, I'm going to be there at 7. I'm going to be ready. But I'm going to give a little analogy why I believe God doesn't give us a date, December 7th or January 1st or whatever the date may be. How many of you guys remember high school or college? All right. How many of you guys ever remember getting a syllabus that told you everything you needed to know for the entire year? It told you every single test date. It told you every single quiz date. My question to you, were you guys ready? I was a good student because I wasn't getting bad grades. I was a bad student because I was really good at procrastinating. If you gave me the date and said, next Thursday, you're going to have a big test. Maybe it's your final exam even. Maybe not that one. Let's call it a big test. Do you think I started studying that night? How about the following night? The following night? How about Wednesday night, the night before? Sorry. How about an hour or two before the test? Exactly. 10 chapters, whatever the amount was, I'd be like, okay, dark words only. That's going to be what I need to memorize. If people knew the exact day and the exact hour when Jesus was going to come, they'd be tempted to wait to the very last moment. God is not about that. God is about a God of relationships. And you can't build a relationship in 6 minutes. Now, I want to make it clear. If you're in a car accident and you give your life to Jesus in that last moment, I believe you can be saved. But if you have an entire life, God's not looking to get the last 2 minutes. He's looking to walk with you for every single moment of your step. It's not just a legal arrangement. It's a relationship. And you can't build one of those in no time. He wants us to be ready now. He wants us to be ready today. So we can't pick dates, but we can get a sense of when it's getting closer. Just like when the water starts boiling, you know it's about time to put in the pasta. In verse 32, Jesus compares the signs of his second coming to fig trees. I don't have a fig tree. I have apple trees and stuff. So in Vermont where I was. So how do you know when you're getting apples or that apples will be coming? You start seeing blossoms on the tree. For the fig tree, Jesus tells them, when the leaves come onto the tree, you know the fruit is about to come. You might not know the day that it will be ready, but it's about to be there. So when the contractions get bigger and stronger, you know Jesus is about to be here. So let's tonight look at the contractions and how big they're getting. I want you to notice that Jesus gives us three general types of signs to look for. He gives us signs in the religious world, he gives us signs in the political world, and he gives us signs in the or did I say that one already? Signs in the religious world, signs in the political world, and signs in the natural world. We're going to start with the religious ones that Jesus told us to look out for. All right. Where's my next notes? Oh, I'm flipping through them too. All right. In Matthew 24:5, it says, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and I will deceive many." I want you to notice that there's that word again, deceived. How many people will be deceived by a false Christ? Many, not few, many. Jesus says it again in verse 24. "For false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders, so as to deceive, if possible, even the very elect." The last little bit means to deceive even those who have been studying, the ones you would think should know. He's saying they will even be deceived. It's there again, one of the biggest themes in the Bible. There's going to be one moment in time, or many moments in time, when we are not going to be able to trust our own senses. We're going to see people do miraculous things, like maybe heal someone, or maybe, walk on water, whatever these weird signs may be, but we have to know what the Bible says about these people. Just because they're performing signs, miraculous signs, doesn't mean that they are Christ. And in that moment, you have to understand that miracles, they're not miracles, real miracles, but even the devil can perform them. Because Jesus says, be careful, in the last days, there are going to be tons of these people. You know, over the century, there's always been one or two crazy people. When the 1000th century passed, 1,000 years after Jesus, there were a couple people that was like, oh, let's get on board. This must be a big event. I'm Jesus. And, okay, every few years you have it. But let's wind it closer to us. Have you guys ever heard of someone claim to be Jesus before? Maybe in the news? No? All right. Well, the next slide has this man named Sun Moon. Do you guys recognize this picture? This was before I was born, so I don't recognize who he is. But in the 1950s, a few decades ago, this Korean preacher named Sun Moon started a unification church. Maybe you've seen mass weddings before. He would literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of people at once just get married. Now, there's nothing really harmless with that, but okay. It's just a little side note. This doesn't have anything to do with his message, but he actually was one of the ones that started the Washington Post newspaper. He was one of the founders of that. It seemed harmless. He's just marrying a bunch of people until you start to listen to his sermons. The Reverend Moon claimed to be the second coming of Christ. He claimed that he was born to finish Jesus' work. That he, meaning God inside of him, is living in me. And he said, I am the incarnation of himself. Does that echo anything from the Bible? Have you ever heard the I am before? In the Moses' time, what does God say? I am the I am. And this guy here is repeating that here. And this is the 1950s. All right, the next one, Jim Jones. Anybody ever hear of him before? All right, now we're getting closer to me. I'm still not born yet. My mom is. In the 1970s, we had Jim Jones of the People's Temple. He started it in San Francisco, but when the feds and all the FBI people started figuring out about this wacko guy, he moves to Jamestown, Guyana. And what did he do? The government was going to go check them out here. They were going to fly in and inspect his church. So he got a little scared, and he talked to his entire group about drinking Kool-Aid laced with cyanide. Have you ever heard that term, don't drink the Kool-Aid? That's where it came from, literally. It came from here. And in this final meeting of his congregations of hundreds of people, he told them, we're going to drink this poisoned Kool-Aid. And one lady stood up, and she said, I've been reading my Bible, and this doesn't seem like Jesus. And no one followed her, and they all died. Not her. But it doesn't seem like something Jesus would do. Nobody listened, and they all died. But they didn't have to. If they had read the word of Christ, they would have the words of Christ, they would have known that this would have happened, that there would have been false Christ. So we've had two people so far. Remember I said there were a couple around the turn of the first millennium, the first 1,000 years? Well, here we are again. Within 20 years, we already have two that hit Time magazine. This isn't just two in the world. Hit Time magazine. How about in the 1990s, a preacher by the name of Vernon Howell? Anybody hear of Vernon Howell? All right. Well, he changed his name to David Koresh. You might recognize that one a little bit more. Down in Waco, Texas, what did he do? Well, he picked this name, David Koresh, because David, he wanted to be more popular. David was from King David of the Bible. And Koresh is another way to say Cyrus. Cyrus was the guy that we read about last night and that freed the Hebrews out of Babylon. So he thought that that would be a good name for himself. But there's an evil twist to this guy. He believed that he was another coming of Christ, but in fact, he said, I am the sinful Christ. He told people, and he had followers. Think about this. All these people have followers. He told the people that when he first came 2,000 years ago, Jesus, the one that died on the cross, he said, I came to live life without sin. And then when he came again in the 1970s, he said that he was here to live the sinful life, to experience it. That doesn't sound good, but yeah. All right, so what did David Koresh end up doing? He ended up burning a bunch of people alive down in Waco, Texas. Did that have to happen? No. The Bible said stay away from those type of false prophets. All right, so we have two so far. Now we have another one. This is all in the 1900s, 1997. I was walking by now. So I don't know who he was, but I was alive. In 1997, police in San Diego discovered the bodies of 39 people who had been listening to Marshall Applewhite, a guy who told them that there was a flying saucer behind the comet Halley-Bopp. Okay, this guy's already lost me. There's a flying saucer behind that comet. It gets better or worse for these people. He tells them, listen to this, you can rise to the next level of humanity. All you have to do is take your life. And you can board this spacecraft and go higher. Kind of sounds wacko, right? He had followers. People actually believed him. So what they do is they go out to what's called the same thing Jesus did, the Last Supper. Apparently, the waitress tells the news or whatever, all they ordered was a bunch of lemon wedges. Kind of weird, I don't know why. Then he went home and they all poisoned themselves. And the last two put a plastic bag around their head and killed themselves. 39 people. Guys, this story goes on and on and on. There's more of them. There's always been one or two through history. But right now, there are literally hundreds around the world. Just 10 or 15 years ago, it was estimated that there are 1 million people on planet Earth claiming to be Jesus. 1 million. In the U.S. alone, about 10, 15 years ago, there was 1,000 active people with followers claiming to be Jesus. So 1,000 Jesuses with actual, cult followings. Like I said, I had never heard this, but once you start doing this research, it's kind of wacko. And it's kind of funny because in 2000, another millennium, there were so many people that arrived in Jerusalem claiming to be Jesus or claiming to be the Messiah that they actually named a psychiatric disorder after it. They called it the Jerusalem syndrome. And the worst part about this is people are getting hurt. Jesus didn't, when he was on this earth, didn't come to harm people. He came to heal people. But also, Paul talks about this in his letter to Timothy about the last days. In 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 5, it says, in the last days, perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. We're going to come back to this verse in a future night, but tonight I'm going to focus on this. Do you think this is true? What it is saying is they act like Christians. That's this having a form of godliness. They seem Christ-like, but they deny the power of Christ himself. All right. Just a few years ago, there was a group called the Barna Group. They do like surveys and stuff like that. And they decided that they would take, in North America, thousands of Christians, and not just like, oh, I'm a Christian, but like professed, oh yeah, I go to church every single week Christians. And they asked them 4 basic questions that less than a century ago would have been no-brainers, like, oh yes, oh no. And there was no other options. It was a yes or a no answer. You guys are going to be blown away with what they got, just with a few simple statements. The first question, you guys could probably answer this too. God is the all-powerful, all-knowing creator of the universe who rules the world today. Would you agree with that? 100%, absolutely. You can click the answer for that. 78% of church-going Christians said yes. Now that seems like a good percentage, 78. But what does that let you know? 22% said no, God's not in control. Out of thousands of Christians. That's hundreds of people. All right. Next question. Satan is not a living being, but a symbol of evil. Would you say Satan's a symbol of evil or a living being? Living being. All right, you can click the answer on that one. 59% agreed that he was not a being. 3 out of 5 Christians said he's just a symbol of evil. But when I read Genesis and the fall of man, it seems to me like he's a real thing, talking to Eve and talking to Adam. But 3 out of 5 Christians. And guys, this survey was actually taken in 2009. Look how much further we are. We have less professed Christians in the United States, I'd say today, or less strong Christians, it seems, than we did back then. Our values have changed a lot since then. All right, the next question, this one's going to blow your mind. Jesus sinned while living on earth. No, right? The Bible says that, right? I don't read a single passage that tells me Jesus sinned. This one breaks my heart. Now remember, these are self-professed Christians, Bible readers. You can show the answer on that one. 39% of Christians couldn't bring themselves to say that. Almost 2 out of 5 Christians believe that Jesus must have sinned. But that's not what the Bible says. Paul predicts a day when people profess godliness, pretend to be Christians, when they would go through just the motions, when they would still call themselves Christians, but they would deny the power behind the faith. This is having the form of godliness, but denying its power. Let's keep moving. Okay, so we said that there would be religious signs. We just covered that one. The next one is going to be political signs. 3 things to this message. In Matthew 24:6, it says, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom." And here we go again. Now, we've always had war, and it's sadly a very tragic part of humans' existence. People have been killing each other over nothing, over land, over friends, over just disagreements. But has it increased in the years that we've been alive? Or even before we've been alive, since after Jesus? All right, next slide, you're going to see a very sad statistic. Did you realize that in the 20th century alone, in the 1900s, more than 200 million people died to warfare? That's more than all the other warfares in history combined. That's very disturbing. And of course, we've always had war, like I just said. But after century, we started getting really good about it. 200 years ago, 300 years ago, what would we do? Actually, let's wind up. 500 years ago, how did we do war? Swords, spears, sticks, stones, bow and arrows. You had to see the person that you were about to take their life. So yeah, we don't see the 200 million, but it became really personal. You made it personal. Fast forward to the 1900s. What started happening? Airplanes, tanks, bombs, guns. Fast forward to the 21st century. What do we have now? You can literally take a drone from this room here. Okay, not literally this room here, but a little tiny box in the United States. You can kill someone on the other side of the world, go out to dinner just like it was a video game. Like, there's less connection to warfare today. It's less personal, but even more deadly. Last time I checked, you guys can check this out for yourself as well. There's a Wikipedia page that keeps updates on how many conflicts are going around the world. In this moment, there are 27 armed conflicts, 20 separate wars or issues with thousands of people dying. And we've seen one of the bigger ones this year when Russia invaded Ukraine. I don't even know what the death toll is up to. I don't think they know what the death toll is up to. Tens of thousands of people from April all the way till tonight. And it's going to keep going that way. It's so sad. So 27 others as well, or 26 others. There's a lot in Africa that's going around. Tonight, there are 8 countries that we know of that have nuclear weapons, that we know of, and a few more are trying to get them. Even though the Cold War is over, there are still enough nuclear warheads in this world tonight to destroy the human population 50 times over in 30 minutes. 30 minutes, and you can wipe us out 50 times. And what about the tension in the Middle East? Iran wants nuclear weapons. ISIS is still wanting a caliphate. Russia's already pushed back into Ukraine, trying to take back land that they lost in the 80s. And even tonight, China's trying to take back Taiwan. The news told us a couple weeks ago that China's expected date to take Taiwan back is by 2028. They gave us just a few years left, and we don't even know when that first, shot is going to be taken. So let me ask you, what would it take to start World War III? How much would it take for the pot to boil over? Every generation has been absolutely certain that they can create world peace, but they've all been wrong. And our generation has probably been wrong the most because we have less peace now than we did 50 years ago. How much would it take to push that pot over? How much would it bring to have a worldwide financial meltdown? We're seeing that right now coming out of COVID. How does your bank accounts look? Not good. Inflation's up to 9%. Germany's paying 6 times what they used to pay for gas. The financial markets are crashing. I think the Dow Jones is still down from what I hear. Not that I follow stocks, but I catch a glimpse here and there. And the Bible tells us about the financial side of things on where this world's going to go. In James 5, 1-3, it says, Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and the corrosion will be witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up your treasures in the last days. You've built up all these treasures, and they're fading away. It doesn't matter what you build. That's what we talked about last night. It doesn't matter how strong you build your empire. It all comes to an end. Nebuchadnezzar thought that. And according to this verse, 08 is just a warm-up to what's to come. The Great Depression has nothing on the financial woes that we will have before Jesus comes. Okay, so we covered religious signs, political signs. Now we're going to cover natural signs. And these ones, whether you follow politics or not, I can forgive you, and I don't follow politics, for not knowing everything going on. But natural signs we're seeing literally every single day in our own communities. All right, Matthew 24:7 talks about this. And there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. Notice that there are 3 things that Jesus tells us to watch for. What are they? They're famines, pestilence, and earthquakes. Let's start at the top of the list. Right now, there are millions and millions of people facing food shortages in sub-Saharan Africa. In one region alone, there are more than, listen to this, 28 million people who don't have enough food. I'm going to put this in perspective for you. 28 million people. Texas is 29 million people. About the size of Texas, in one place in Africa, are going on food shortages. Imagine that, an entire state. That's too many. Even though there's more than enough food in this world, I can go down to Walmart and fill my entire house up, and Walmart will still be full. Like, it's not bothering anybody. Even though we have all this wealth, a child dies of starvation every 6 seconds. Beyond sad. In Somalia, there are 3 million people living on food aid, and there are more than 1 million people living in tent cities over there. There is more than 1 billion people on this planet who don't have their basic nutrition needs met. You know, I was listening to, like I said, the news. I try to not listen to it too much. There's an estimate that this year in the fall that there will be 1.3 billion people with food issues due to all the stuff going on in Europe right now. You see, there are tons of floods happening, and there's tons of droughts, and it's affecting both sides. This lets me know that, on other statistics, 4 out of 5 children born tonight will be born to families that can't afford to feed them. Even though we have more wealth, even though we have more food than ever, people are still going hungry. It's just one more sign that the contractions are getting deeper and bigger and stronger. And then he mentions pestilence. What is a pestilence? It sounds like a pest, but it's not that. It's a strange disease. All right, think about the last few years. We might have conquered polio, smallpox, but we are slowly losing the bigger war. In the last 2 decades, Streptococcus A, something we called strep throat, I might have had it when I was 10, was not fun, has moved out of throats and began becoming flesh-eating diseases. Did you know that? Kind of weird. People have lost limbs, legs, arms, maybe even their lives to this simple disease that used to just take some antibiotics to clear up. Spinal meningitis is making a comeback in our schools. The Black Plague is still alive in the rodents of the West Coast, and every year it's heard that there might be a couple people that have come down with this. When will it jump into the human population? Hopefully never. About, 10 years ago or so when we had the Ebola incident? I remember that. Everybody was freaking out. This was way before COVID was even thought of. And we had, a handful of cases in the U.S. I think 2 or 3 people died. Extremely sad. But thousands of people on the other side of the ocean were dying from this Ebola. Who knows when that jumps back up? Hopefully never, but we'll see. Tuberculosis is coming back, and it's getting harder and harder to treat. Not too long after, we had a respiratory disease called SARS. Anybody remember that? I think I was in high school when that one hit, so I wasn't really paying attention to anything. But that killed a lot of people. And we compare COVID to, I guess, the next thing. We've had the West Nile virus, mad cow disease, some salmonella in the spinach. We've had swine flu. We've had MARS in the hospitals. And the list can go on and on and on. See, we had these things in the 20th century called antibiotics that were created. And man, they were really good. They helped you clean up. Like any disease, here's an antibiotic. Oh, you're not feeling so well? Here's an antibiotic. I've had 2 surgeries, maybe 3 surgeries. I had wisdom teeth out, a bunch of stuff. And I had Lyme's disease. Every time I had a big issue, here's an antibiotic. And I needed them, trust me. It wasn't fun. But the problem with this is death due to bacteria that's antiviral has been 7-fold in the past 15 years. So the antibiotics that we are using now are no longer fighting the same diseases the way they used to, because the diseases are getting smarter. So is there pestilence in our world tonight? Yes, you better believe it. And we haven't even started talking about the strange weather yet. I know someone here tonight said they had 10 days this summer of 98 or higher in Pennsylvania. I guess that's strange. I was living down south. That was every single day. And on top of that, the bees around the world have been dying. Did you ever hear that? And what happens when you don't have bees? No pollination. Who does that affect? Everybody. Exactly. We all feel that. It's a different world than it used to be just a little while ago. And it's exactly how Jesus predicted it. All right, then we have earthquakes. Now, earthquakes can be a very contentious subject, I guess you could say. People measure earthquakes different ways, and they don't always agree on what magnitude it is or how severe it is. But there's a pattern that has happened for the past 2,000 years, and we're going to take a look at that. I know of someone who decided they wanted to look at the history of earthquakes since Jesus. And so what they did is they said, I only want to see the big ones, 7.0 and higher. Now you're asking, how would they know 2,000 years ago if it was 7.0 or higher? Well, he decided the way he would judge this is by the destruction. A 2.0 earthquake is just a tremor. When you start getting 7 and higher, what starts happening? People start dying, buildings start collapsing, tsunamis start happening. So he decided, let's see what the path is since Jesus on. In the first 300 years, now it's going to be broken up in 300, 200, and then you're going to see 100. So pay attention to that. In the first 300 years after Christ, there was 1. Okay, no big deal. 1 in 300 years, I'll take that. How about the next 200? So now we've gone from 1 to 200. 2. Okay, no big deal. 1, 2. All right. For the next 300 years, there was just 1. From the year 800 to 1,000, there were 3. Okay, so now you're asking yourself, Jonathan, I don't see a pattern. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. What? What's next? All right, the year after that, not 4, exactly, not 4. It goes back down to 2, from 1,000 to 1,100. So now we're in a 100-year gap. So now you're actually seeing more for a shorter amount of time. So 2, okay, that doesn't seem like a big deal. In the 1100s, there was another 2. So you start seeing the pattern's pretty familiar. All right, let's go to the next ones. In the 1200s, guess how many there were? Oh, just kidding, there's 1. All right, the same was true for the 1300s, the 1400s, and then the 1500s had 2. So that's not bad. Nothing serious yet. This is when things start getting interesting. 1600s on. All of a sudden we have, oh, it's already up there, 7. Okay, does that seem like a big jump? 1 to 7? Or 2 to 7 from here? All right, keeps going. It's not over. All right, now you might say, well, we're seeing more big earthquakes because they might have had seismographs. Well, seismographs didn't exist back then. But on top of that, remember, we're just talking about the big ones, the ones that destroy and take lives, destroy buildings. Let's see what happens in the 1700s. In the 1700s, the number nearly doubles to 13. That's a big leap from just 200 years ago having 2 to having 13. In the 1800s, it doubles again to 26. And then watch this, the 1900s, 138 actually. In 100 years, it used to be 1. Now it's 130 or more. And then the 21st century, when earthquakes never seem to stop coming. There's actually now, I heard, that on average, of these big earthquakes, even though we don't hear them all in the news, it can be up to 800 in a year. Anywhere from 2 to 800. That's crazy. Not in 100 years, in 1 year. In 2004, we had what may have been the biggest earthquake in recorded history. It hit an unbelievable 9.3 magnitude and became the first earthquake to ever be recorded on every single device in the entire world. It was also the longest earthquake. Have you guys ever been in an earthquake? Does it feel like it lasts forever? It might, it depends, but it seems like for a lot of people that in a 30-second or a 1-minute earthquake, it could last forever. This one lasted 10 minutes. And when it was done quaking, there was an 800-mile-long trench in the bottom of the ocean, 800 miles long. And of course, it sent a devastating tsunami to Indonesia, and it killed 250,000 people. One earthquake claimed over 250,000 lives in 2000 alone. The numbers start getting scarier. All right, there have been hundreds of tsunamis in the 1900s, but the 2004 tsunami caused more devastation than every single tsunami combined. And then we have the biggest earthquake that hit Haiti. They had a really scary one in Japan that flooded Fukushima, the nuclear power plant that they had. There's no question about it. These things have always happened, but is it as normal, business as normal? No, they're getting worse and worse. Has something changed? Let me ask you this. How big are the contractions? What time is it? I want you to try something interesting. Let's go back just a few years. How many people remember 2001? I think I was in second grade, if I remember. What happened in 2001? 9/11. Did that change the world? I had someone that I work with. He's older than me. He might have kids my age. He told me that before 2011 that he could walk into an airport and there was no such thing as TSA. They didn't check your bags. You just got on the plane and went. And I was like, man, that seems fun. Now we have to wait in line. But when this happened in 2001, the world changed completely different. Nothing was ever the same. I'm guessing you guys remember where you were. Like I said, I was in second grade. All right, what did this end up kicking off? It ended up kicking off, and we ended up learning that we were going to war in Afghanistan to find who? Bin Laden. You know how much money that war cost us every single month? Anybody want to take a guess? $1 billion every single month. $12 billion a year is just to fund that. Don't worry, that's not the biggest number you're about to hear. All right, suddenly Enron collapsed. I had to Google this. What was Enron? Apparently, it was a thing in Texas, power plant, if I'm correct. They had like a big scandal that they did. So this was one of the biggest things that happened in 2008. Most of you might have forgotten about it. And it shook up the economy. Time magazine asked this question: how sticky will it get? And I want you guys to notice, from here on out, in the past couple slides, these are all major themes in Time magazine. So you might have put some of these in the back of your head, and I don't even have all of them. So from 2001 till about 2022, I'm going to show you a bunch of things that have happened in our lifetime, and not all of them are in my presentation. All right, and then we learned, guess who wanted a nuclear bomb? Korea. They started testing missiles, shooting them out in the ocean. Fortunately, they were all failures, but have they stopped since? What's their goal? Isn't it like destroy America or something like that? All right, we'll see how close they get. And then we went to war in Iraq, and to the tune of, guess how much this one was? $1 billion a week. We went from going in Afghanistan $1 billion a month to $1 billion a week. And we ended up getting, Saddam Hussein over there. But that whole area is still a mess today. And it had one of the most brutal regimens in world history. It killed everybody. And then we had the SARS epidemic that touched down in North America. Apparently this happened up in Canada. You guys might remember this. This was like the COVID before COVID. And quite a few people died from this. And then I remember this one. I think this was, I forget what year it was. But who remembers when New York City lost power? How did they respond to that? Fortunately, it wasn't in the cold, but everything went crazy. I remember watching videos of people in the streets looting and tearing things apart and freaking out, thinking that God was going to come soon. And the funny thing is, other countries are sitting there laughing because there's many times they don't have power. I lived in Puerto Rico for 5 years, and you'd just be there studying and doing your homework, and all of a sudden the power would go out because it blew too strong on a sunny day. It wouldn't take much to set off their power. All right, let's fast forward. And then the tsunami that hit Southeast Asia that killed more than 250,000 people. And then in 2005, I think I do remember this one too. We ran out of names for hurricanes. You remember that? How many letters are in the alphabet? 26, exactly. We had 27 that year. Imagine that. And of course, that's when the big one hit New Orleans. Man, my words are bad. And it ended up putting thousands out of their homes. And they ended up hiding in the Superdome, and the military came just because there was so much unrest in the area, lots of looting, lots of lawlessness. And that's when we found out Iran wanted nukes. And their goal was to bomb who? Israel. They wanted to take them off the map. And while we were trying to digest all this news of all these things happen, That's when the economy crashed in 2008, and they suggest that might happen again in the near future. Many businesses never recovered. People lost their homes, people lost their jobs, entire banking companies just disappeared overnight. And that's nothing compared to what happened in Haiti. Does anybody remember the Haitian earthquake? That one was pretty nasty. The world estimates, or I guess the U.S. estimates, that 150,000 people died in Haiti. You know what the Haitian government estimates? 300,000, upwards to 300,000 in one earthquake. It's not a tsunami. That same year, Deepwater Horizon sprung a leak, and it dumped almost 5 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. That's roughly 210 million gallons of oil. They say it turned the Gulf red. And 3 years later, they were still receiving tar balls washing up on the shore. In December of 2010, people all over the Middle East started to rise up and topple their governments. Tunisia, twice in Egypt, Liberia, Yemen. We had a civil uprising in Bahrain, and Syria. And just a few years later, millions of refugees started pouring into Europe. We've seen major protests in Algeria, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Morocco, and Sudan. Something is changing. And then in 2011, we had the big Japanese earthquake. It was a 9.0 magnitude. It was the 5th largest earthquake in recorded history, and possibly history at all. And it was the most powerful one for Japan. They had a 12-foot seawall to block any, tsunamis or anything to come in. It did nothing. 40% of their coastline was pummeled. They lost $122 billion worth of damage, and almost 16,000 people died. This is a first world country. And of course, we don't really know the effects of what that nuclear power plant had. In 2011, the Syrian civil war came out, and the government started using chemical warfare against its own people. In less than 2 years, just from chemical warfare, 120,000 people were murdered. These numbers are ridiculous. I'm from Vermont. That's twice our population. We're 600,000. I'm sorry, that's 60. Yeah, no, we're 600,000. I stand corrected. That's a lot of people. In October 2012, Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast, causing $65 billion in damage. And to this day, there are portions of New York City that still haven't recovered. Like I said, I was from Vermont, so we got a good chunk of it coming up through. And I remember visiting. I was first in northern Vermont, so I wasn't near the south where it really got hit. And I came home, and there was this dirt road that we used to drive up a mountain. And when I walked on this dirt road, you could no longer drive up it. And there was like a 50 to 100-foot chasm just washed right out. I'd never seen anything like that. And I'm glad I wasn't in the storm. In March 2013, we had confirmation that tuberculosis is getting out of hand, and we seem powerless to stop it. And that's when we found out, for some reason, our honeybees were dying. You see, this is all major things that Time magazine has talked about, but this isn't all of them. These are just the ones I have on my presentation. In 2013, Typhoon Yolanda nailed the Philippines, and it killed 6,200 people. In 2014, the Ebola outbreak happened, the worst one on record. Thousands of people died, and several in our own country. And then a few years later, Zika, a mosquito-borne illness, started to make severe birth defects in children. And then in 2017, a new low for public school shootings. And then we had Vegas, 59 people murdered from some psychopath up in a motel. Then we had different shootings. We had the Baptist church shooting. We had the Douglas school shooting, the Parkland school shooting. This year we had the Uvalde school shooting. And it seems to be getting worse and worse. We never heard about these things 100 years ago. But our society is degrading. And we never know what one's going to be next. And the last few years have been unpredicted natural disasters. We saw Houston devastated by hurricanes, Harvey, and then Puerto Rico. I was there for Maria and Irma. It was a little bit more fun for me because I'm a survivalist, so I don't need much. But I remember being there, and when it hit our island, I didn't have power for 1 month, and we didn't have water for 3 weeks. We were getting truckloads of water brought to our campus. Um, and I remember the night we got power back. You never realize how much you can appreciate power until it comes back on. Imagine a month, I had no air conditioning. My house didn't have it anyways. I had a nice fan that would blow on me while I slept. But a month of me just laying in bed, I'd take a 1-gallon shower every single day. And then I remember the night when the fan kicked on. It was probably like 12 o'clock at night, and I was happy. All right. And of course, we can't forget the most recent one, your favorite, COVID. It shut down the world for over 2 years and killed hundreds of thousands of people. So let me ask you, what time is it? And how big are these contractions? All these, said Jesus, are the beginning of sorrows. They are the beginning of labor. And he gives us one more sign to watch for. Guys, something I want you to pay attention to. Everything seems like doom and gloom, but Jesus ends it on a positive note. How did Daniel 2 end up last night? This will be destroyed, this will be destroyed, this will be destroyed, but then the kingdom of God will come. And the same is for this prophecy tonight. Because the Bible is not a story of God who wants to destroy us. It's a story of hope, a God who wants to save us. All right, in Matthew 24:14 it says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations. And then the end will come." Here's the good news, guys. You know, Jesus said, when he said this, the disciples must have thought, this guy, does he really know how big this world is? He says the gospel has to go everywhere. How did these people get around? On their mopeds? No, on their sandals. I imagine they could think in their brain, by the time I even get to a couple countries away, I might not even still be around, especially by the time I'm preaching. They didn't have microphones. They didn't have DVDs, or they didn't live stream anything back then. And yet, Jesus tells them, when the message has reached everybody, then I will come. And we're seeing that happen today. You know, as bad as this world is getting, and as bad as things like TV and internet and all these things that are a lot of garbage in our lives, we've been able to use them as a blessing to reach people that would have never been reached before. In the year 1800, the Bible was only available in 70 languages. That's a lot. I just need it in English. Do you know today there have been over 5 billion copies of the Bible printed in over 3,300 different languages. In a 200-year gap, we have like 30 times or 40 times the amount of languages, and I don't even want to do the math, 50 million more times the copies of the Bible. Right now, Christianity in Africa is actually growing 65% faster than their population. That's crazy, right? Right now, Christianity in South America is growing 4 times as fast as their population. And it's growing by the hundreds of thousands in India. You know, that, like I said, this program has been not just here in Hamburg, it has been on 6 of the 7 continents. And one of the people who presented this message in India said 25,000 Indians showed up to their opening night, to their program. 16,000 were baptized, or 16,000 gave their life to God at the end of their series. That's crazy. That's way bigger than Hamburg. Right now, there are over 100 million Christians in communist China. Do you know what it's like to be a Christian in China? They don't have churches over there. They have to meet in secret. If they know you're a Christian, your house gets bulldozed. And if they know you're a Christian, you might end up in one of their concentration camps. Yet there is over 100 million of them. That's awesome. Because at the end of the day, you can't stop the gospel. No government on earth has ever been able to touch the unmatchable love of Christ. And just like Jesus predicted, the gospel is going to all the corners of the earth, right on schedule, right on time for him to come again. But of course, you have to ask this one question. Why all the devastation? Why does God allow these bad things to happen? Why is he letting this planet fall apart? Well, think about it for a moment. Did God ruin this planet? No, everything in all of creation, God says, and it was good. When did things not become so good? When we started to sin. Isn't that sad? So we've destroyed it ourselves. It's just a consequence of an untethered planet from the love of God. And that's why God has promised a new world, a new kingdom, that this one's not going to be replaced. It's going to last forever. And I suspect he's letting this one fall apart so we can put our hope in another one. Because this one, like everything Babylon that was built, is gone. But Jesus's won't be. I know this can be painful. I know that the planet isn't the only thing falling apart. How many of your guys' lives seem at sometimes it's falling apart? Family issues, friends are dying, people are leaving you. You don't know where you might be able to afford your next rent payment or anything. You don't know, you don't have any hope, it seems like at times. But that's okay. Maybe right now your marriage is falling apart, or if you lost a job, or maybe you're even having health struggles. You know what it's like to lose things. But I want you to listen carefully. Because like I said, this is not a story of destruction and doom. This is a story of hope. The sermon or the message that Jesus gave is not over. What did I tell you? To understand the Bible, you have to read the whole thing. Let's jump to John chapter 16. It kind of clears up everything. A woman, when she is in labor, has sorrows, contractions, pain, because her hour has come. But as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish. For joy that a human being has been born into the world. Therefore, you now have sorrows, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and your joy no one will take away from you. The birth pains aren't going to last forever. These contractions are almost over. And God makes this promise. When Jesus comes again, it's going to be like the birth of a child. You're going to forget about all that pain and all that labor the moment you see the delivery. Because it's going to be gone forever. And because the kingdom of Jesus never passes away, no one can ever take it away from you. You see, the statue in Daniel chapter 2 was crushed into pieces. And what does Daniel say happens? It becomes like a chaff, like a powder, and gets blown away, never to be remembered again. And God's kingdom lasts forever. I'm telling you, Revelation is not about death, doom, and destruction. Revelation, it speaks peace. Are you guys ready for Jesus to come again? To get rid of all this garbage? I don't know about you. I'm ready for a place that I don't have to worry about where the next paycheck or meal is going to come. Because I can just rest in Jesus. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, God, it is obvious that we are living on borrowed time, God. We thank you for the moments that we still have, God, that you are calling out to us, that you're showing us through history that all these devastating and all these things isn't from you, but you're letting it be a warning that you're coming soon and you want us to be in heaven, God. You see, when your kingdom comes, the invitation is for each and every one of us, God. Help us to accept this great gift that you have given us, Lord. Lord, we thank you for your mercies and love, Lord. And as we part tonight, Lord, help us to remember that one day all these things will be passed away. And Lord, we thank you for the message of peace. Amen. All right, let's not forget, tomorrow night is what? Armageddon. You're going to like it. Have a great night, and I'll see you then.